Chapter 25 Terraformation. Ino tied her hair into a knot and pushed it down the back of her jumpsuit. The absence of gravity was an inconvenience here on the bridge, but down below she knew it was having an effect on the fight. "Combat report from Lieutenant Commander Beninato," Brisbane called through the intercom. "The Marauders are disoriented. His team is pushing out from their positions to link up with Liechtenstein near life support." "Finally, we're making some progress," Ino said. "What about Azaryn? This whole fight was to buy time for her." Navigator Raha and Acting Ensign Yamada both gestured to one of the windows on the far side of the bridge. "Take a look for yourself," Raha said. "You can see it from here." The sanctuary moon was shining brightly in the distance. It was impossible to see the surface because the cloud layer had become opaque. "It looks like a pearl," Yamada muttered. "Pretty." A powerful lurch brought everyone back to reality. "Engineering report," Ino said, pressing her thumb to one of the intercom call buttons. "External explosion centered on the thruster node 3 Sierra," replied the voice of Chief Engineer Kazuki. "Might want to check on our friends walking the hull." Meanwhile, the team of Savanti spacewalkers dove for cover. One of the disruptor banks on the frigate Sayana swiveled quickly, trying to draw a bead on the incoming troops. "Move to the right! Stay in cover! They know we're here!" Ryland ordered. He dove behind a breaching pod just as another disruptor blast lit up the starfield. The energy bolt sailed over his head and impacted a section of hull some 700 yards away, leaving a crater in the armor plating. "Bring up the heavy weapons," Ryland ordered. "Make your target the grapple arms on the fore and aft." A team of 2 Savanti fighters ran forward. One of them was carrying a BFG-10K, a type of rocket-propelled grenade launcher typically used by UN forces. The first soldier, a male, got down on one knee and shouldered the BFG. "Load!" he yelled. A second soldier, a woman, approached from behind and loaded a rocket-propelled plasma bomb into the launcher. Then she tapped his shoulder before diving for cover. "Fire!" Ryland felt the Marathon's armor shudder beneath his feet. A cascade of sparks erupted from the nose of the enemy frigate. Then the forward grapple arm and landing gear both collapsed. That was when a seemingly innocuous detail suddenly became very important. Marathon was still under thrust. With its tenuous grip on the carrier's hull suddenly weakened, the force of inertia suddenly overpowered the frigate. Sayana's one remaining grapple arm strained against the increased load until it broke. No longer attached to Marathon, the frigate started to slide along the hull toward the impulse engines. There was just one obstacle in the way. In Hangar Bay 2, Hermione Durand and Air Boss Lee Tai were waging a fighting retreat. "They've breached the hangar!" Hermione yelled. "Everyone fall back! Use the shuttlecraft for cover!" 36 Destican fighters were surging into the hangar, but Hermione and Tai had a plan. With a great roar of engines, one of the Russian Tupolev bombers took flight, rotating in place as it used a VTOL engine to hover in the middle of the hangar. "Don't get greedy up there," Lee Tai said into her radio. "We just need a gun run." "Tankbuster 5 to all friendly units in Hangar Bay 2, replied the bomber pilot. "Recommended you activate your IR beacons if you've got one. AI is going to whitelist anyone flashing a strobe." Guns, guns, guns. The thunder of Tankbuster's 30mm cannon nearly deafened Hermione. She threw herself behind a forklift and waited out the cacophony, reaching up to her left shoulder and tapping a button on her power armor that activated her IR beacon. "I see lots of little pieces down there," the pilot commented. "Call out targets for me to— Oh, fuck!" Very suddenly, a Destican frigate smashed into the hangar's exterior entrance. The Sayana shattered into pieces on impact, fragments scattering everywhere. The Tupolev bomber swayed dangerously and began to smoke as debris punctured the fuselage. "Gotta put her down!" Hermione ducked beneath the forklift just before the Tupolev slammed violently into the apron just beyond runway 2. Looking up, she saw that roughly half of the Sayana was still inside the hangar. The rest of the ship had fallen victim to the laws of motion and blown off into deep space as a cloud of shredded metal and wires. Slowly, Hermione stumbled to her feet and spoke into her radio. "Bridge, this is Hangar 2. We seem to have acquired an enemy frigate. Half of one, anyway." 400,000 kilometers away, Azaryn shuddered with joy as the final torpedo shot away from Vivarium. Reza Agdashlu cheered and made a transmission. "Marathon, this is Vivarium. All Terraformation torpedoes are away. Expect a progress update soon." Azaryn refocused on her computer console. Now she just needed to guide the torpedoes to their landing places and make fine-tuned adjustments to the Terraformation procedure. The Sanctuary Moon was now starting to live up to its name. Even from here, Azaryn could see that the atmosphere was now breathable for certain forms of intelligent life. But she could do better. The surface temperature could be higher, the water less salty. To sustain the bare minimum of life was not enough for Azaryn. The moon had the potential to become a Gaia world. Azaryn could just see the lush and vibrant paradise when she closed her eyes. She would continue to work, to push her astro creation system to its limits while the battle played out around her. "The Dessticans are coming again," Delegate reported, "and the last 2 Allied missiles are away." The Destican frigate Ambika evaded the last 2 ground-to-space missiles and closed in. "Oh, looks like we finally run out of chances," Reza started to say. Then he spotted a welcome signal on the sensor display. "Look! We're not hosed yet!" "Vivarium, this is Wolfpack 1 Actual. Wave at us as we go by." The MiG-95 starfighters of Kelly's Wolfpack were closing fast. Dylan gave orders to his wingmen. "Switch countermeasures to ECM and missile guidance to anti-radiation. We've got to hit that fucker on the first pass." "Missiles ready," each pilot called back to him. "Fire on my go," Dylan told the squadron. He looked down at his weapons control computer. 20 seconds to weapons range. A 2-tone alarm began to fill the cockpit. The same thing happened to the other pilots. "RWR spike," one of the wingmen called out. "They're locking us." "Transmit ECM now," Dylan ordered. All of the MiG-95 starfighters activated their radar jammers, buying themselves a few more seconds before the enemy could open fire. 10 seconds to weapons range. Dylan locked up the enemy frigate. "I've got tone," he said. The anti-radiation missile had found the enemy sensors and would follow the electronic signals back to their source. "Wolfpack 1, Fox 1! Wolfpack 2, Fox 1! Wolfpack 3, Fox 1! As soon as the MiGs came into weapons range, they launched their missile payloads at the enemy frigate. The Ambika turned to bring its disruptor banks to bear. "Don't evade! Blow through!" Dylan ordered. "We have speed on our side! Keep moving!" Dylan led his squadron in a high-speed flyby of the enemy frigate, reaching the Ambika just after their own missile salvo. "Good effect on target," one of the wingmen said, peering through his canopy to get a better view. "Looks like he took a few hits to the tachyon sensors, and I think his impulse thrusters are down too." "Is he dead?" Dylan asked. "No, he's still moving," the wingman replied. "Moving like he just got punched out by God, but he is moving." "Right then, everyone start bleeding speed and get ready to turn around." The squadron was traveling so fast that turning 180 degrees was a very tall order. The starfighters flipped over and started to burn their engines retrograde, opposite their direction of travel. As they accelerated, Dylan watched the crippled Ambika close on Vivarium again. "We've got to move fast," Dylan said. "I'm shedding excess weight." He flipped one of the emergency switches on the right side of the cockpit. Moments later, there was a loud clunk and a shudder as both of the radar jamming pods were jettisoned into space. "What are you doing?" a wingman shouted. "You're defenseless without ECMs." "So is Vivarium," Dylan retorted. Without the extra weight of the electronic countermeasures, Dylan's fighter accelerated faster than the others. Before long, he was shooting back toward Vivarium. "Go! Go! Go!" Dylan urged his fighter. The Ambika reoriented itself so that her grapple arms were facing toward Vivarium. "Switching to chain gun," Dylan reported. "Closing in. I'm in range." Dylan laid on the trigger, and the nose-mounted mass driver began spraying lead toward Ambika. Little clouds of sparks told Dylan he was scoring hits. His fighter shot past the enemy again. "Turning to re-engage," Dylan called out. "Kelly, what the hell are you doing? You can't bank at that speed," his wingmen said. "You need to decelerate." But there was no time to slow down. Ambika was just 900 yards away from Vivarium. The grapple arms were extending. Despite being pushed into his seat by high G-forces, Dylan squinted his eyes and leaned forward, trying to see exactly what part of the enemy was being covered by the pipper in the heads-up display. "A little to the left," Dylan grunted. "Just a little to the left." There were dark shadows on the peripheries of his vision. He could no longer hear the shouting of his wingmen, the clanging of alarms in the cockpit. All that mattered was his aim and the trigger. Dylan was so focused that he forgot to breathe. Dylan squeezed off 5 more bursts. A jet of gas suddenly appeared on Ambika's dorsal side before suddenly erupting into an explosive decompression. He had ruptured a fuel line. The frigate's maneuvering thrusters began to malfunction, causing the enemy ship to spin hopelessly out of control. "I got him," Dylan sighed. "I got him." Unable to handle the intense G-forces, Dylan passed out, and his fighter, still accelerating with the throttle pinned, veered out of control. It lost altitude until it kissed the upper layers of the Sanctuary Moon's new atmosphere. "Marathon, this is Wolfpack 2. 1 enemy frigate disabled. Vivarium is safe." "Well done," Ino replied from the Marathon. She sat down and allowed herself a brief moment of rest. At last, something had gone right. But then, while Ino started to drift out of her chair, the radio transmissions continued. "Vivarium, Wolfpack 3. Collision alert! That frigate is too close and his thrusters are burning out of control." "This is Vivarium. Acknowledged. We are maneuvering." "Vivarium, is that the fastest you can move? You're about to be hit." "Wolfpack 3, this is a science vessel, not a starfighter. We are not nimble." "Vivarium, this is Wolfpack 3. Brace for impact. You're about to be hit on the upper aft quadrant." Ino jumped out of the captain's chair and held onto the ceiling, looking down at the rest of the bridge crew. EW Officer Mancini shook his head. "Captain, I... But he did not need to finish his sentence. Moments later, Prisbin called through the intercom. "Bridge, CIC. A disabled warship has collided with Vivarium. They are going down. Projected point of impact with the planet's surface is 54 degrees, 48 minutes, 25 seconds south by 68 degrees, 18 minutes, 30 seconds west. Projected impact speed will be 495 meters per second." Ino looked around the bridge in stunned silence. "How long will it take us to get there?" "About 24 hours to get back into orbit around the Sanctuary Moon," said Acting Ensign Yamada. 20 if you let me cut some corners, but we would still need extra time to launch shuttles and land on the surface." "The Savanti fleet is breaking contact with the Dessticans," comms officer in Nungane reported. "Both of the Allied corvettes are heading to the moon at maximum burn. All of the remaining Destican ships are converging on the commandeered slave ship. So are the Carabineers." "What's the status of the Sanctuary Moon itself?" Ino asked. "Well," Navigator Raha let out an impressed whistle. "If you'd asked me 12 hours ago, I would have called it a toxic world. But now, it looks much more habitable. Scanners are picking up an atmosphere composition that's almost breathable. Still too much carbon dioxide and sulfur, but it's much better than it was this morning. Ino grabbed her radio. "Liechtenstein, what's going on with the enemy boarding party?" It took Elodie a few moments to answer. "Tell your buddy Rylan I owe him a kiss," Elodie called back. "Whatever he did to that frigate topside really messed up the enemy down here. Both Dessticans and Marauders are disorganized and falling apart all over the place. My Marines are mopping up now, and the ship should be fully back under our control in about half an hour." "And the butcher's bill?" Ino asked, dreading the answer. 183 dead, about 320 wounded, 72 missing so far. Ino swore. "Get my ship back under control, Liechtenstein," Ino said. "We need to consolidate and counterattack."
Destiny is hard to meet. He'll hunt you down somewhere along the way. Don't you see we're meant to be the prodigies that came to show the way? 'Cause I don't wanna rule the world alone. None of us can make it on our own. I'm screaming but I cannot hear a sound. The suffocation slowly comes around.